Chapter 2, Identity Crisis. Standing outside of the Electric Pen tattoo shop in Hollywood, I allowed myself a moment, mentally digesting all the events that had brought me up to this point. After the Russian bachelorette fiasco, I was compelled to believe that stripping on the weekends would be the perfect profession to complement my personal training job during the week. As excited as I was about the extra cash in my pockets, the main reason that I loved to dance was the insatiable feeling of satisfaction that it had provided me. That night with the Russians, I discovered something about myself that I never even knew existed inside me before, and I was determined to bring it out again. The thing was, the business of exotic dancing didn't exactly come with a how-to manual. This left me wondering how in the hell I was going to book myself more shows. I managed to land a few by emailing agencies that I'd found online, and I was also fortunate enough to tag along on a couple of gigs that my roommate Lenny had booked, but those had been far and few between. I'd had a taste of easy money while simultaneously being held up as a sex symbol, and like a strung-out junkie, I needed to get high as often as possible. Through my online search, I'd stumbled across a man by the name of Nick Hawk. Nick was a former stripper, and he recently landed a leading role on a late-night cable reality show. Nick also owned a company called Explicit Strippers, and he was looking for new dancers. After a brief chat over the phone, he asked me to come by Electric Pen so that we could meet in person. The tattoo shop was extremely colorful on the inside, with the walls covered in graffiti and eccentric artwork. My ears picked up retrowave music playing in the background. The tattoo shop was empty that day, save for one tattoo artist and his client, who I assumed to be Nick Hawk. "What's up? You Andy?" The former stripper was sitting in a recliner chair, wearing only a pair of tiny boxer briefs. His entire body was covered in tattoos, and on this day, it appeared that Nick was adding to the collection. "That's me. You're Nick, right?" I asked him back. I heard a toilet flush, and shortly after, one of Nick's female groupies joined us. A pair of busty girls, one an angel, the other a devil, were being colored in on the inside of his thighs. The artist, a Hispanic dude with both arms sleeved in tattoos, was putting on the final touches. I noticed Nick had a box of carry-out Chinese food in his lap. Talk about time management. The tattooed reality star wiped his greasy fingers before stretching his arms out wide. "Monster, let's take a break." He rose from out of the chair and approached me. "Cool tats." I tried my best to seem unfazed by the situation. I'd never been inside of a tattoo shop before, and certainly never met anyone like Nick. "Thanks. Monster here does all my shit. If you ever want any ink, he's your guy." The two of us ended up conversing for over an hour. Nick conveyed to me that he needed a young guy who knew how to dance. He also loved that I could pass as either Caucasian or Hispanic. I think he could sense how eager I was to work, so he offered me the job by the end of our meeting. I expressed my gratitude and assured my new boss that I wouldn't let him down. Nick came off like a real straight shooter, and within weeks, he was routinely booking me shows. The morning of every gig, Nick would send me a text message that contained the client's name, address, and phone number, as well as how many girls were attending, the type of party it was, my arrival time, and how much money I was supposed to collect. Everything about Nick's setup was perfect, minus one hiccup. He never bothered to put my picture up on his website. Explicit Strippers had several photos of dancers to choose from, one of which was a handsome model named Zeb. The photo was in black and white, and the guy resembled me quite a bit. To be fair, I remember Nick telling me that he didn't like the pictures I had sent him, mainly because none of them were professionally shot. Still being new to LA, my idea of a photo shoot was asking Lenny to take shirtless shots of me with an old iPhone in the back alley of our apartment complex. Nick also reassured me that it was common in the industry to go strip a party off of someone else's photo. He said that when he first started, he went as 8 different guys, and only 3 of them were from his own images. To this day, I don't know if the real Zeb ever even danced, but Nick said that he was the most popular picture that women would request. Nick's theory was, if it ain't broke, don't fix it, so he would send me in Zeb's place. 9 times out of 10, the women wouldn't notice that I wasn't the guy in the photo when I arrived on their doorstep, but every so often, they would start to ask questions. It was annoying to say the least, but I wasn't about to complain to Nick. The guy was booking me shows, and his parties were always lucrative. On one Saturday, I received a phone call from Nick asking if I could do a bachelorette party in Hermosa Beach later that night. It was a vacation home full of hot chicks and right on the sand. There was just one catch. It was set up to be a two-man show, and the other dancer was a guy I'd never met before. I didn't like the idea of dancing with someone that I didn't know, so I asked Nick if I could bring a friend of mine instead. He told me that the girls had already picked out the other dancer and were expecting the two of us to show up together. My first instinct was to bail, but against my better judgment, I decided that I would give it a shot. By this point, I'd had the privilege of meeting a few other male strippers and concluded that they typically weren't my type of people. Nick vouched for the guy and gave me the other dude's number. I was told to call him when I arrived at the house. It was a beautiful day out, so I hit the gym that afternoon before deciding to head down to Hermosa Beach. Once I arrived, I took a long, peaceful walk in the sand and watched the sunset. When it was dark out, I sent the other dancer a text, telling him that I was in town. He messaged me back, saying that he was close by. Since we had some time to kill before the show, we agreed to link up. I walked over to an empty parking lot where he was hanging out at. From the moment that I laid eyes on Skills, I knew we weren't going to become friends. He was a big mountain of a man who looked as if he may have played college football or taken a stab at professional wrestling. I hopped into the passenger side of his SUV, which reeked of cheap cologne and protein shakes. Skills had on a pair of neon stunner shades, even though it had been dark out for hours. Trying to break the ice, I asked him if he read any good books lately or what kind of TV shows he enjoyed, but Skills ignored my questions entirely. "Nick tells me you're pretty new to all this," he said with a smug look, right before taking a swig from his chunky protein shake. "Sort of. I've done about 10 of these things. I never kept an accurate count, but 10 seemed like a fair estimate." "I've been doing this for years," he boasted. Skills then proceeded to educate me on how seasoned of a male stripper he was, the number of businesses that he owned, and how many girls he'd banged. All his glory stories came out, one after the other. Our 30 minutes together felt like 30 hours. I kept staring at my phone, watching the time pass, excruciatingly slow. "Here's the deal. We're going to use my playlist. You should dance first. I don't want to upstage you." The legend laid out his battle plans to me. "Whatever you want to do." I was just happy that we were finally getting out of his car. The David Beckham knockoff he had on was making me nauseous. Skills shot the girls a text message as we headed toward the house. It was a townhome, located right along the beach. I couldn't complain about the venue or the crowd, a half dozen of the cutest Indian women that I'd ever laid eyes on. The lady who hired us showed Skills and me to an upstairs bedroom where we could change into our outfits. "Did she just call you Zeb?" Skills asked me as we laced up for battle. "Yeah." "Is that your real name or, like, short for something?" "Zebulon." The name randomly popped into my head. "Zebulon? Sounds Greek." Skills was a scholar. We were both going to be performing as cops. That's what the ladies had asked for, and a good thing too, because at this point in the game, it was the only costume that I owned. To his credit, Skills' cop outfit was more put together than my own. Police cuffs, assault boots, he even had a foot-long flashlight. We walked downstairs and were led by the host into a dark room that resembled a home theater. There were no couches or chairs, just a bunch of cushions and a few giant beanbags spread throughout. The room had an elevated stage in the middle of it as well. Skills welcomed the ladies to our show and laid down his ground rules. He told them about how tipping worked and that he would be available for private lap dances in the back after the show. I scanned the room during his speech. Most of the women were giggling, huddled up next to one another. It seemed like a shy crowd, but as I'd already learned, looks can be deceiving in this line of work. When the legend was done speaking, he set up his portable speaker and started the playlist. I hated the song he chose for me to dance to, but being a good sport, I gave it my all, entertaining the guest of honor and her friends. After a few minutes, the song came to an end. Skills was up next. He turned on the strobe light that was mounted on top of his speaker and began gyrating in front of the bachelorettes. The girls didn't seem to enjoy his act as much as they had mine. I took advantage of the free time and nestled up with one of the ladies in the crowd. She offered me some of the margarita that she was sipping on. Most of the women were drunk by the time Skills finished his act. For the next few songs, we both danced from girl to girl, collecting tips. I could tell the women were smitten with me because they kept handing me most of the money, which annoyed Skills tremendously. I could sense how upset he was because he barely spoke to me for the rest of the night. I found his silent treatment ironic, whereas earlier in the car, I couldn't get him to shut up. We stripped down into our thongs while collecting as much cash as we could. There was a point in the night when several of the ladies were picking the money up off the floor that they'd already thrown so that they could secretly hand it off to me. Once we'd been there for close to an hour, Skills was ready to take off. For me, the party was just getting started. "It's over. Let's go," my brawny co-worker bellowed down at me. I was lying on the floor with a cute Indian girl sitting on top of me. She was right in the middle of giving me a lap dance, wearing nothing but her underwear. "I'm going to stay here for a while," I told him. "This party is way too fun to leave now." "That's completely unprofessional. Our job here is done. It's time to go. This is Nick's gig, not yours." Skills wasn't having it. "We want him to stay," the half-naked girl that was riding me told him. "You can leave." Skills' face was flushed with anger. "Nick will hear about this," he screamed before snatching up his suitcase and storming off. After the legend's dramatic departure, the night became even wilder. A lot of what Skills said to me was right on the money, but I was still new to the game and having the time of my life. I didn't see anything wrong in hanging out once the show was over, and I still don't, but only if the women ask me to. If there's one person that's uncomfortable with my presence, I leave immediately. Since the very beginning, that's been one of my ground rules. As for this party, the decision for Zeb to remain as a welcome guest was unanimous. All night long, the ladies kept calling me by my Greek alter ego. I'll admit that it may have bothered me at first, but once I was good and drunk, being called Zeb began to arouse me. I brought my own portable speaker in from the car, and we were all dancing again in no time. The theater room we were hanging out in had no windows, so it wasn't long until everyone was dripping in sweat. In their attempt to cool off, most of the girls stripped down into their underwear. Things got even crazier at the house around 2 a.m. Half of the party left the theater room to go to sleep, while the ladies that remained hauled me into an upstairs master bedroom and turned on the bathtub. They loaded the bath with bubbles and instructed me to get in. Sitting in hot water sounded therapeutic, so without complaint, I stripped naked and went along with their plans. Slowly sinking into the steaming hot bath, I closed my eyes, allowing myself to relax. The ladies left the room, only to return a few minutes later, dragging the guest of honor in behind them. I noticed that the bride seemed to be coming against her will. Her friends eventually managed to get her inside the bathtub, but as soon as they left the room, she jumped out and grabbed the towel. The steaming bath had calmed me so much, I could have cared less that she left. I heard the bedroom door slam shut behind her, and figured I'd soak my muscles until I was sober enough to drive home. I'm not sure how much time passed, but I eventually heard a whispering voice call out to me, "Zeb?" When I opened my eyes, the girl that had been giving me a lap dance earlier in the night was now standing under the doorway. At first, because of the dim lighting and hot steam, I could only make out her silhouette, but I soon noticed that she was entirely in the nude. The Indian princess was also holding a bottle of wine, as well as 2 champagne glasses. We exchanged smiles, and just like that, she joined me in the bath. The two of us were engaging in foreplay in no time. After thoroughly enjoying ourselves in the warm water, we ended up in the bed together, and it wasn't long until we began intercourse. This was my first time ever being with a girl after one of my shows, and I remember what stood out most was how vocal she became during sex. "Oh, Zeb! Oh, God, just like that! Oh, fuck me, Zeb!" Her enthusiasm excited me to thrust even harder. The girl was such a screamer, I glanced over at the door more than once, hoping that she'd remembered to lock it. Not that it would have bothered me much if any of the girls did come in. I was in the zone that night. The whole experience gave me a newfound appreciation for role-playing during sex. Pretending to be somebody else was such a turn-on. I felt like a mythological lover. A few days later, Nick called me. Skills had informed him on how unprofessional I'd acted during the gig. He claimed that I had instructed the ladies to give me all the tips, instead of him. The legend also reported to our boss that I disrespected his performance because I was too busy making out with a girl instead of keeping the attention focused on him. The same day as Nick's reprimanding, I received a nasty text from Skills himself. His message said that after thinking it over, he felt that I needed to pay him some money to make up for his shitty tips that night. Skills gave me the number of his bank account, telling me to deposit $100 in it as soon as possible. After I didn't bother responding to his message, Skills became infuriated. He left me a threatening voicemail saying that he was going to expose me to the entire male stripping community for the self-centered asshole that I was. He also added that we better not cross paths again or there would be problems. 11 gigs into my exotic dance career and I was already making enemies. Lucky for me, the Legends beef was with a Greek god named Zebulon, not Andy.